Welcome, Penn Staters. You are listening to the Football Letter Podcast. This week, we welcome Courtney Jackson. Courtney is the president of our Greater Chicago chapter, one of our largest and most impactful chapters. Courtney is a two-time Penn State graduate, earning both degrees from the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences. In Chicago, she's an emergency management specialist at FEMA. We just caught up with Courtney earlier this summer at the ALC conference. It was great to see her. We're going to talk with Courtney about what they're doing in Chicago to unite alumni, how they're welcoming graduates, recent graduates into the chapter. We're going to share some stories, hear how the chapter also leverages football to connect Penn Staters in the Chicago area. Courtney Jackson, welcome to the Football Letter Podcast. It is so great to see you. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me, John.
Your time at Penn State, you said you came from the Midwest, you came from Minnesota. Having coming from the Midwest, what was it about Penn State that made this the school for you?
So I think my kind of situation was a little bit different from most folks. I had no idea about Penn State anything. I did science fair in high school, was really successful with it. Got to go to a lot of conferences before going to college. And everywhere that I went to these conferences, I met with a lot of different earth and mineral science folks, and they told me that Penn State was the place to be to study anything like that. So I was fortunate enough to kind of visit the campus the summer before my senior year. And I'm sure, like most people listening, I just fell in love with the campus, and I knew that that was the place for me to be. I luckily got a scholarship that was able to cover my out-of-state tuition for all 4 years. And then I was fortunate enough to go back a second time to try to get my PhD. And again, it was an awesome experience both times.
What were some of the things that you were involved in on campus during your time here that stand out to you?
The two things I was really involved with were the rifle club during undergrad. So in the basement of the White Building, if not many people know, there's actually a Olympic shooting style range. And at the time, that's where fencing also worked and practiced in. So we were always in competition with them, trying to schedule our timing so that when they got done, then we'd go in. So I was the secretary of that club. And then I was also the inaugural president for the American Indian Science and Engineering Society on campus. So I started to try to get that chapter going. I have American Indian descendancy. My grandma was a tribal member in Minnesota at at the Fond du Lac Ojibwe reservation. So I really wanted to try to bring a community to campus that brought together all of the Indigenous and Native American students that were on campus, since it's such a small population, and just try to give them like a more of a sense community and like a family for people to kind of come together and not feel so isolated, especially with some students who were maybe coming from the Southwest, like from Navajo Nation, that were really far removed from their family and their culture.
That sense of community, of wanting to belong to a community, how much of that was something that you brought with you to Penn State? And then how much of that was something that you continued to cultivate while here?
Yeah, for me, I didn't really realize how big community was until I think halfway through my freshman year. My freshman year was unfortunately when the Sandusky scandal was unveiling, kind of, and and I really got to see how strong the Penn State community was, and how deep those roots went, how everyone had each other's backs. So that was really important to me. Like going through the rest of my time was not only am I a non-traditional student, but I'm also an out-of-state student. I'm also a minority student, and so I wanted Penn State, my experience for Penn State, to be the same for everybody else. That we were all in it together. We were all there to support each other. And then that's kind of what I've been trying to do with the Chicago chapter, at least too, is look at for those opportunities where everyone can come out, everyone can have a good time, because we're all flying under the same Penn State banner.
Yeah, that's so well said, Courtney, and it's a good lead in for what I wanted to ask you next, which is having the background that you do, having, grown up from the Midwest, coming to Penn State, not knowing a lot of people, how much does that inform and benefit your role now as the president of the Chicago chapter, knowing that, you were in the situation that a lot of folks are in when they come to you?
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things about the Chicago chapter is we have a very strong engagement and presence with our local families and the parents. Our students send off, and we do two parent alumni mixers, one in the fall and one in the spring. And so we really like engage with those parents, especially the spring one, because more often than not, that's the ones that we have brand new students who have like never been to Penn State before. They just wanted to go on a whim, so their parents are all jittery and nervous to begin with. So they come to these events, and we get a chance to kind of just tell, like, calm their nerves, say like, this is what to expect. This is how we can help each other. And then I get to kind of talk about my own personal story, saying like, hey, like I was from the Midwest and I was from a little bit further away than Chicago. At least with here in Chicago, we have the direct flights to State College. We can have bus trips, like caravans. If parents are driving out to go see their son or daughter, you can tag along with them or something. So I think those events have been really successful because it's helped kind of already early on demonstrate to those families and those students how strong that Penn State community is.
As the president of the Chicago chapter, when you're connecting directly with an alumni, or maybe you're seeing Penn Staters connecting with one another, what's going through your head? What's the level of satisfaction knowing that you're having a role with Penn Staters connecting with one another?
Um, for me, it's the most satisfying thing ever, honestly, as cheesy as that sounds. Especially because Chicago covers such a large area. We're not just covering downtown, but we're covering all of the suburbs in the Chicago metro area. So just trying to bring people across a wide geographic area to one location to spend time with each other and engage. It's just really heartwarming to see to still see that people want to get out and want to engage with folks, make friendships, even people who are coming from out of town, and they're just going to our website or following us on social media and know an event's coming on, and then they take time out of their day to come to our event, even though they could be going tourist sightseeing and whatnot. So that's just really it really just makes me happy at the end of the day.
Speaking with you earlier this summer on the University Park campus, you shared what I thought was a really inspiring perspective of how when you went out to Chicago, year 2020, we all know what happened that year with the pandemic. If you don't mind sharing with our alumni, what was the role that the Chicago chapter played for you while you navigated, what was a difficult time, not just for you, but really for our country?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of like what you're saying, John, 2020, the pandemic obviously started. I had moved to the Chicago area January 2020. And then a few months later, lockdown happened. So I was already kind of at a disadvantage because I'd moved to a brand new area, didn't know anybody in the area. I didn't have any friends in the area. My family is still in Minnesota. So I really had no connections to the Chicago area whatsoever. And one of the very first things I did was I looked up the local chapter, saw that Chicago had a chapter, and saw that elections were coming up soon and board applications. So then that spring, I submitted an application. I got on the board as a member at large, and just kind of got my foot in the door. And that was just really invaluable to me because it gave me an opportunity to not start from scratch, I guess, basically in a brand new city, in a brand new place. I still knew that I had some friends and connection through the chapter, at least, with having that common thread of us all being Penn Staters.
So if someone is listening, they want to get involved with the Chicago chapter, maybe they live in or near Chicago, they'd like to join the chapter, maybe they just want to learn more about what you're doing. What's your advice for them, or what are some ways that they can get involved with your chapter?
Well, we're always looking for volunteers. You don't necessarily need to join the board and have a big commitment to that. Um, we any event that we're doing, even if it's you just have like a cool memorabilia item that you want to submit to us for a silent auction, to use for scholarship or thon donations. We always are just like kind of open. Anytime people have questions, we're more than willing to talk and kind of give you an idea what the chapter is about. More often than not, I just recommend that people either reach out to us through our website, or through our email, psuchicago.org@gmail.com.
So following up on the sense of community, on the power of the chapter, that the impact that it had on you, how have you seen the power of the alumni network, the Penn State alumni network? What role has that played for you, both with the chapter and maybe even beyond?
Um, so at least like with joining like the alumni association, I've gotten an opportunity to meet so many more people than I could have ever met even when I was at school. So it definitely has that like networking potential, and just gives me the opportunity to again try to talk to folks and have like that icebreaker foot in the door. I love hearing just random Penn State memories that people have. So that's usually if you meet me in person, that's the first line I'm going to say is like, "What's your favorite Penn State memory?" And then just with the chapter, it's just astonishing to see kind of like what I was saying before that we cover such a wide area in Chicago, and continue to see people come out again and again to support the chapter initiatives, just to come out and have fun, or even if we have folks that never really don't have a strong tie to Penn State, but just want to come out and show support for the chapter and everything that we represent and do in the community, is just a great sight to see.
All right, Courtney, we're going to ask you to brag on the chapter a little bit. What are some things that you do throughout the year? We know you have a big Thon fundraiser. What are some of the characteristics of the chapter that you're especially proud of, or things that are noteworthy about the chapter that you would like to share?
So yeah, I think the three big areas for the chapter are we are really involved in scholarship, we're really involved in student engagement, and then we're really involved in Thon. So with the scholarship, our scholarship chair, Bob Nagy, he has done a phenomenal job of fundraising every year and ensuring that we are contributing above and beyond what we need to do to contribute to our endowment. So every year we try to at least give out $10,000 in scholarships to folks in the Chicago area based off of different criteria we have. But the two main ones are you need to have at least like a 3.0 GPA and be from the Chicagoland area. So last year, I think we gave out awards to two students. I think the year before that, we gave it out to three students. And just hearing the stories that come from those students that are impacted by those scholarships is really just heartwarming. Just because you don't realize how much just like even a small amount like that could contribute to educational success for the students, and making an impact. And then as far as the other events, our student engagement, like I kind of talked about before, we have our annual student send off, these parent alumni mixers, and like I said, with the alumni mixers, I just really like engaging with those parents and giving a chance to talk up Penn State because I love Penn State, and then also just getting an opportunity to kind of follow up with them and calm their fears so that they feel more confident in the choice that their son and daughter made. And then lastly is our Night for the Cure Gala. So that usually happens about 2 weeks before Thon. It's not as big as a Liberty Ball or DC over Diamonds, but it's our own like little contribution to it. Again, it's just another fun way for Penn Staters to have an excuse to get dressed up, come out. We do like different fundraising events leading up to that. We did like a workout for cures where we had workout classes and tickets. The proceeds from tickets for those events like contributed to a donation amount. And then we also do like a silent auction fundraiser that night, as well as having people from the Alumni Association and Thon and Four Diamonds come and have as special guests.
Yeah, Courtney's being modest. The Chicago chapter Thon fundraiser, that's one of the biggest Thon fundraisers we have. And going out to Chicago, we get out there for the football season, and other folks will get out there throughout the year for other events. Like Chicago really is one of our favorite places to visit. The Chicago chapter always does a great job of welcoming us, welcoming Penn Staters, and there's always a crowd that shows up, especially in Chicago. Courtney, I want to ask you about football, but before that, you made me think of something. I feel like you're part of a larger trend that we're seeing where recent graduates, folks who have graduated in the last 4, 5, 6 years, or at least in the last decade, have started to take on leadership roles, being the president of a chapter. That's a lot to take on as a recent grad. I'm wondering, one, what inspired you to not only get involved with the chapter, but then to take on the responsibility that is being the chapter president?
Yeah, so at least like getting involved with the chapter, it's kind of like I was saying before that I wanted to have some sense of community to coming to the Chicagoland area, and I knew that that was the best way for me to kind of at least have some sort of network, and not feel so isolated. Penn State was unironically the best years of my life, and I wanted just that opportunity to give back to the university in any way I could. And that's more or less the reason why I decided to kind of take over this leadership role is because um, Penn State had given me so much. It's the least that I could do to kind of give back, as well as continuing to foster that strong sense of community and having us be like a resource for those Penn Staters who maybe are relocated outside of our East Coast home base and find themselves in the heart of Big Ten country.
So for football, we're a little biased, but we kind of feel like Penn State is Chicago's Big Ten team. It feels like that way when we go out there. Penn State's coming out to Illinois twice this season, 2023 season. We're talking with Courtney here, late July. How does the chapter leverage football to lift up everything the chapter is doing, whether it's the scholarship fundraiser or something else in terms of, using what's happening with the football program to really promote your chapter and get Penn Staters connected with one another?
Yeah, by far, our football watch parties are huge. This year we have 3 bars that we're running in the downtown area. So Smoke Daddy's Wicker Park, AJ Hudson's, and Durno's. And at these watch parties, each bar kind of has their own different vibe. So we try to have that so it's kind of a way, there's just like a little something for everyone, basically. But at these watch parties, what we try to do is really leverage the people that are coming there, try to give it as close to like a game day vibe as possible. We have a host table for folks to come in, kind of get acclimated, get entered into a raffle. So we do a raffle at halftime that is for a prize that we get from either the Alumni Association or someone's donated. And that's just for coming to the game. Just because we're happy to have them there. We're happy for everybody to come and be cheering on our favorite team. And then we also run 50-50 raffles at the same time. So the 50-50 raffles, they kind of depend on the cause, but we usually alternate between scholarship and thon. And then we have a couple throughout the season sprinkled in that are going to donate directly back towards local causes. Like in the last couple of years, I believe we did donations to a local food bank and provided them with a cash check for that. And yeah, like it's just it's a great opportunity for folks to come out, kind of see what the chapter is about, and then also just get a chance to watch some great Penn State football.
Yeah, the Chicago chapter watch parties are legit, and your chapter has a lot of street credibility. So Penn State's immediate past president, Dr. Eric Barron, when he was in Chicago one year, he said, "Where does the Chicago chapter watch their football games? I want to go join them." And from what we understand, he showed up wearing jeans, just kind of was low key, and just wanted an
Mhm.
opportunity to hang out with other Penn Staters. And your chapter provided that opportunity. But were you there by any chance, or did you hear about that?
No, that was before my time, but
Oh,
I did hear a little bit about it, and yeah, it's we always try to go for a really opening, welcoming environment. Come as you are, come how if you want to dress up for the whiteout, completely decked out in a white ghillie suit, we're all for it. If you just want to come and you're not even wearing your Penn State shirt, but you're a Penn State fan, that's great as well. The only time we have trouble is if you walk in with a Ohio State shirt or maybe a Michigan shirt, but we'll still accept you as long as you're cheering for the right team.
yeah, real quick note. So Courtney was back in town for one of our volunteer conferences. We had about 60 or 70 alumni up at the Nittany line trying for a group photo. It was a great moment. Somebody walked by in an Ohio State shirt. It was almost like somebody scripted it. And the alumni, they're kind of booing him, but in a good-hearted way. And we ended up talking with him, and he was a prospective student, and it was a really good moment. So yeah, there might be some lighthearted cheering, but yeah, you're still welcome.
Hmm.
You're listening to the Football Letter podcast. We are speaking with Chicago chapter president Courtney Jackson, two-time Penn State grad. Courtney, let's talk about your professional role in Chicago. Emergency management specialist at FEMA. You're a two-time graduate of the Penn State College of Earth and Mineral Sciences. If you don't mind, maybe share a little bit with our alumni about your professional role in Chicago, what you do, and what what about your current role do you find satisfying?
Yeah, so I kind of have a unique situation where I technically work for FEMA headquarters, just living in Chicago. So it was kind of one of those situations where I got the role during the pandemic and everyone was working remotely, and then was able to kind of like negotiate a remote work situation. Um, but the group that I'm with is really I I can't say enough that I just love my job. Like the mission that we're doing, the work that we're doing is really inspiring. Um, I'm on like the recovery side of things, so we're the folks that are coming in probably like a month to 3 months after a disaster has happened. So we're not the immediate boots on the ground folks at all. But what we are really focused on is like that long-term recovery and trying to look at how communities are recovering from the disaster, how we can build back better, and then also making sure that that doesn't happen again. So it's there's a lot to it that it's kind of hard to encompass in like one statement, but it's just a really satisfying job to be able to be on the forefront of helping people and being able to see how the work that you're doing is impacting a community over a period of time and for years to come.
All right, Courtney. Well, we thank you for everything you're doing for us, for FEMA. We'll just a couple quick hit questions for you before we wrap up. When you're back on campus, what's at the top of your to-do list or want to-do list?
It's always hard because I kind of have a mix of things I wanted to do when I was an undergrad versus things I did in grad school. So I always at least try to go hit up local whiskey, the Second, the Clover, whatever you go buy it, and get a breakfast shot. That was like kind of a tradition with me and my undergrad friends. And I think it's the best shot that you can probably get, and the only one that I actively go out of my way to get. Otherwise, one of the newer locations that I like going to is Voodoo Brewery out by Happy Valley Brewery. I'm a big water person. Coming from Minnesota, that's probably not that big of a surprise, but I just love the serenity by that little creek, sitting out there getting some great seafood and having a nice refreshing beer. And then I also always have to hit up the creamery. So we can't really get too much creamery ice cream out here in Chicago unless we want to pay an arm and a leg to have it shipped. But sometimes we get it for special occasions.
All right, Courtney, we're going to just kind of wrap up with asking you about your involvement with Penn State, which we have been talking about. Kind of wanted just to try to summarize as best as I can. If you were giving a campus tour, let's say you're part of Lion Ambassadors back on campus, you're giving a tour. What has the Penn State alumni community meant to you, and how big of a role has that played for you in your career?
For me, I think I would just tell folks that like it's my home away from home. It's my second family. Um, I was really looking for that when I was looking at colleges, and that was more or less the reason why I picked Penn State because it's just you walked on campus and seeing how everyone engaged with each other, just to give you the warm fuzzy feelings. It's hard to kind of feel like a loner at Penn State and even like outside of Penn State after graduating when you know that we have the largest alumni network in the world. You can go to any event across the country that's a Penn State event, and you're going to be welcomed with open arms. Doesn't matter what year you graduated, where you came from, if there's like any background rivalries that are happening, as long as you're wearing blue and white, you're going to be welcomed with open arms. And I think that's really what's permeated throughout my college career as well as into my professional career.
Courtney Jackson, so well said. Thank you for joining us on the Football Letter podcast. We will see you this season. Anytime you're back on campus, please stop by the Alumni Center. We're always happy to see you. Courtney Jackson, everyone.
Thanks so much, John.
Hi, everyone. You are listening to the Football Letter podcast. This week, we welcome two-time Penn State graduate and Penn State football letterman, Rudy Glocker. He graduated from Penn State in 1991 and 1993, earning his bachelor's and master's degree in political science. He was a defensive lineman for Joe Paterno's Penn State Nittany Lions. After graduating from Penn State, he spent more than a decade on Wall Street and then formed his own outdoor apparel company in New Hampshire. We're going to talk to him about his time at Penn State, his time as a business owner, all of that and more. We were also going to talk with him about his time playing West Virginia. And we're also going to ask him some questions about his roommate at Penn State, Bob Check, who's also going to be a guest this season on the Football Letter podcast. Rudy Glocker, great to see you today. Thanks for making time for us. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, John. Thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor to be with you, and it's excited to reconnect with Penn State from up here in the North Woods in New Hampshire. So I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a chance for alumni to hear from lettermen and learn their stories and kind of hear from lettermen who embody the success with honor mantra. Your time at Penn State seemed to be very well-rounded, earning 2 degrees. Can you talk a little bit about your transition to Penn State, why you chose Penn State, and how motivated you were when you got to campus to really maximize your time there?
Sure. I think the big deciding factors for me in choosing Penn State, it kind of came down to, I think, 2 things. Where did I think I could get a first-rate education and compete for a national championship? And so if you go back to the late 80s, mid to late 80s, in that point in time when I was making my decision, there were probably really 3 or 4 schools that would fit into that criteria, Penn State being one of them. So I did a fairly selective search in terms of where I was looking. My recruiting, circle was kind of narrow. I should say maybe I narrowed it down quickly. But at that point in time, you go back, you had a coach who had just come off of 2 national championships, Joe Paterno, and obviously the team in 84 and 86. I landed on campus in 1988. So clearly Penn State had the chops to compete for a national title. And also many of the schools that were competing for a national title, I thought Penn State offered me an excellent educational opportunity. And so that's how I ended up at Penn State. Those were really the main criteria in my decision.
Now, we've heard stories from lots of lettermen who've said, Coach Paterno would talk to them about, be more than just a football player, get out on campus, join groups, kind of, meet with students. How did that impact, your time at Penn State, not only as a student athlete, but I mean, really putting the emphasis on student in being a student athlete at Penn State?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about my time at Penn State was that, we were encouraged to be more than just, football players and just more than students too. I mean, obviously studies were important, don't get me wrong, as was playing football, but we were really encouraged to embrace different things of student life. And so even when I was at Penn State, I was active in a couple undergraduate and graduate student organizations. And I think that's really important. I think that gives you in college, you're going there to learn things, but you're also going there to socialize, meet friends, learn how organizations work and do different things. I think all those experiences helped me immensely later in life. And I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity to engage in those when I was a young person, in somewhat of a little bit of a risk-free way, because, the stakes weren't that high. But I think it gave me great experience later in life on how to interact with different organizations, groups, and people.
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing, what student groups were you involved with at Penn State, and maybe what were some of the lessons that you took with you beyond graduation?
Yeah. So one of I guess maybe the pinnacle of it was actually just after I finished playing football while I was working on my master's degree. I was actually president of the Graduate Student Association. So that is the association that represents all graduate students within the Penn State system. And we dealt with graduate student concerns. So, it was a forum for people, whether they were academic, it could have been housing, it could have been healthcare was a big one back when I was there. It could have been trying to find your place at Penn State. So we dealt with graduate students literally from all over the world who were trying to make a home at Penn State and have that experience be a little bit more positive for them. I'm kind of forget some of the myriad issues of the day. Like I said, I do remember healthcare being a big one. I remember class availability, labs, research opportunities were really important. So those are some of the things that we worked on in conjunction with both the students as well as the faculty.
Speaking here with Rudy Glocker on the Football Letter podcast, having a leadership role at Penn State as a graduate student, I would imagine that prepared you in some ways, or maybe in a lot of ways, for life beyond Penn State, starting with a successful run on Wall Street for more than a decade with 2 companies. What were some of the lessons that you learned at Penn State as a student athlete that did transfer well to Wall Street?
Sure. One, there's a couple, I don't, I could probably have a list that's, incredibly long about the lessons that I learned. But one of the things I think is how to really handle pressure and adversity. I think that's something you learn as a student athlete. There's a tremendous amount of pressure to perform, whether it's in practice, in the weight room, during, summer conditioning, and especially obviously on, in games. So I think learning to deal with that, learning how to do it in a public eye, I think is also very important, because when you work on Wall Street, it's not like you're, not hidden some way. It's, kind of an open public space, or at least it was when I was there. And so I think that experience is tremendously helpful. The other thing is, in sports, things don't always go your way. You can have the best game plan and things just go wrong. I mean, that's just the nature of it. And so being able to handle adversity and deal with that, I think, is an incredible skill. And there's nothing like the crucible of big time college football, I think, to really kind of test you in those areas. And so, again, having a leadership position combined with those things, I think what the leadership position did for me was that it helped me deal with different people and different experiences. So it helped me understand, it was able to let me, kind of walk a couple miles in the other person's shoes to understand their point of view, what they thought was important, whether or not I agreed with them. And so I think that combination of skills just gave me a level of maturity that most of my peers did not have when I first started out on Wall Street.
So you talk about being in a leadership position, being in the public eye. That has carried on with you after Wall Street. You're now a business owner. You created Burgeon Outdoor, an outdoor apparel. All right, we'll start over there. So Rudy, you talk about leadership, being in the public eye. Your company is based in New England, Burgeon Outdoor, created in 2019. What was the motivation for you to leave Wall Street, or to transition away from Wall Street and to create your own company in New England?
So the story I always tell about why I left Wall Street goes back to I think it was September of 2007. I have to check my dates on this. So every year I did a trip with a bunch of guys. We'd go back for a Penn State football game. So we went back to the Penn State Notre Dame football game that September. And it wasn't that great of a game, if I remember correctly. I think we won like 35-10 or something. So it was great from a Penn State perspective, but it wasn't exactly the most riveting football game. But there's a lot of excitement if you're a Penn State fan. And the woman sitting in front of me happened to have this T-shirt that had one of Joe's famous quotes, like, "Deep down inside, you have to believe you are destined to do something great." So this woman's like jumping up and down. I'm reading the back of her T-shirt, And I went back to Goldman Sachs, that Monday, and I sat around and I just said to myself, like, what great is going to happen here? Like what's so great about this? I mean, it was a great job. Don't get me wrong. I worked with a lot of wonderful people, very smart, highly motivated. I'm not taking anything away from my experience, but for me, in terms of Rudy Glocker, what do I want to do with my life? Like, how can I do something great? And what I really have striven to do here at Burgeon Outdoor is create a unique company. We make outdoor apparel right here in the mountains of New Hampshire. So while most outdoor apparel is made somewhere else around the world, literally it's made in the room right behind me, about 40 feet away from where I sit. So we make our products here. We donate a significant portion of our sales, 5%, to our environmental and community efforts, which we think is really important. We have different plans for our employees where we try to treat them really well. And we found a lot of success. We have some, our Flume base layer has been named the overall best hiking shirt 2 years in a row by Field and Stream. So we've done some really wonderful things in a short period of time. But what I'm really trying to do here is create a brand, you know what I mean? And create a brand that's powerful, enduring, and can live beyond my tenure here. And for me, that became the definition of doing something great. And then to have an impact here in the community, which, goes along with that. And that was all really driven from a lot of the things I thought about at Penn State, what we were kind of, striving to do at Penn State. And be more than just a football player, be more than just a student, be more than just a person on campus. And that's what, Burgeon Outdoor kind of embodies today.
So you created your company right before COVID-19 hit.
Yeah, I don't always have the best timing, John. I won't lie.
Well, despite that, your company still was able to step up and donate masks to the local community. And so not only did you kind of weather the storm, but you stepped up and helped other folks, other individuals, other businesses through an incredible time of need. It sounded like it was kind of a no-brainer thing for you and your company to do, but having just started the company, what was it like being in that moment as a business owner, wondering, what can I do for my community?
Yeah, well, I think that gets back to one, what was the purpose of the company, was to create a better tomorrow for mountain communities like Lincoln, New Hampshire, where we're based, and you have to put yourself in that time. And then I do think my time at Penn State had an influence on it, right? Like, there was a demonstrated need for a product, and because, to make a long story short, we made and donated over 10,000 masks to local organizations, individuals, things like that. Meals on Wheels programs, you know what I mean? The local police and fire departments here, the ambulance crew, things like that, because they didn't have any masks back at the beginning of COVID. But what allowed us to do that, one, was the commitment of our mission as a company. But number two is the fact that I mentioned earlier, like, we make our products literally 40 feet away from where I'm sitting, right? So, we were able to change our production line over in a day and actually, develop it and do it. We manufacture here, we source from US based companies. We didn't have to wait 6.5 weeks for a boat to come across the ocean to deliver something. And a lot of the things that allowed us to be really effective during COVID-19 are what allows us to be effective today. I joke that our supply chain, like, Sabrina, who's our lead stitcher, she finished a bunch of stuff yesterday. She walked it over about 10 feet to be QC. Then I walked it 10 feet to the rack and we were done, so we have a 20-foot, supply chain, so to speak. But I think those things are important. They make us dynamic. They make us hard to copy. They allow us to innovate. And they allow us a lot of cycle times to improve. And all those things are going to make us a better company, especially as we can repeat them over and over and over again.
So for Penn Staters tuning in and watching, how can they learn more about Burgeon Outdoor and maybe get involved a little bit in what you're doing?
Sure. I mean, the easiest way is to go to our website. It's burgeonoutdoor.com. And maybe you guys can stick it up on the screen. There we go. Thank you very much. burgeonoutdoor.com. You can follow us on social media. You can check out our website. But if you look at those things, I think you can get a feeling for what we're doing here. And I think it's also a really neat story because it shows that, we can create literally world-class, products right here in the United States and make them right here, design them right here, test them right here, et cetera. So it's, we have a lot of pride in what we do and we're very excited about our future.
So that's great to hear. We wish you all the best. We're definitely going to check it out. Transitioning a little bit back to Penn State, we just learned that we're going to be speaking also this season with your former roommate at Penn State, Bob Check. Yeah. What can you tell us about Bob Check? What kind of a roommate was he? And we understand he was the snapper at Notre Dame for Craig Fayek's kick, but what was it like being roommates with Bob Check?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is it's a wonderful story, and I don't want to steal Bob's fire because I'm sure he can tell it better than anybody else. But Bob, first of all, he's a great roommate. I don't remember him snoring too much. I can't say the same for myself, so I think we got along pretty well. But Bob's a first-class guy. He'll tell you he was a manager on the team. We had an issue with our long snapper. He had some experience, and before you know it, it's kind of like 10 days later, he's the starting long snapper. And the one thing you're going to have to make sure to ask him about is his open field tackling skills. So because he had a couple of good hits too on punt returns and things like that. So he was more than just a guy who shoveled the ball backwards between his legs. He was a pretty good athlete. Got downfield. He made some tackles. He's an all-around first-class guy. He was great to have as a roommate. Absolutely wonderful.
All right, yeah, that's great. Like, we love hearing about those bonds that lettermen have. And when you were also at Penn State, you played a team that Penn State fans are going to see this season. Some fans are going to see play for the first time West Virginia. Yeah. What's the significance for you for having a team like West Virginia, Temple, Syracuse, even Pitt going back a few years ago, teams that Penn State used to play all the time, got away from that when they entered the Big Ten. When you see West Virginia come up on the schedule now as a letterman, as a fan, what types of feelings does that invoke?
Yeah, I mean, it brings back a lot of memories. Let's put it that way. So, I didn't play against Indiana or Michigan or Ohio State. You know what I mean? The teams that we play every year, Michigan State, we played West Virginia everywhere. We played Pitt every year. We played Temple every year, et cetera. And so, it brings back a lot of memories. Luckily in the West Virginia, unfortunately, we lost a game my freshman year, but then we won the rest of them. So that was good. But I think what it brings back is a couple of trips to Morgantown, which are unique. It's a different place to go, but also a lot of fun. So my senior year, which was 1991, the last year I was able to play, actually my high school teammate was one of the starting running backs for West Virginia, the guy by the name of Mike Beasley. And I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, that he scored their only touchdown that game, and we beat him 51-6. So we had a good day that day. Hopefully, we'll have a good day on whatever it is, September. I forget the date, 3rd or 2nd, I think it is. So we'll have a good day. But I think one of the things that was really neat about that is that a lot of people from West Virginia would come. Right, it's only a couple-hour drive, and when we go down to Morgantown, there'd be a lot of Penn Staters who would go down, even if just for the day. And so, and I know fans travel today too, but I think having a lot of those local games on the schedule kind of made it fun, right? There were a lot of people, a lot of football players from Western Pennsylvania either went to Pitt, Penn State, things like that, or West Virginia, like I was saying. So a lot of situations where you're playing high school teammates, right? Or, someone from your league that you used to play against in high school. Now you're playing against them in college. And I think there's something really special about that. I think it keeps the game a little smaller, makes it a little more fun, a little bit more personal. And I really I miss some of those games. Like, it's fun to see West Virginia back on the schedule. We also did play Maryland and Rutgers, and they're on the schedule every year now too. But it's fun to see teams like that come back on the schedule. And, I hope to see more of it in the future.
Yeah, and just so for fans listening, when Rudy says West Virginia is a unique place to play, he's being very diplomatic. Like, I've heard stories of fans throwing tomatoes, batteries. My parents attended a game in West Virginia, back in the 70s or 80s. And so unique that's a good diplomatic way to describe it, Rudy.
Yeah, it's an experience unlike any other, I guess, is what you would say. But it's not like the Masters, even though they like to use that phrase. It has a little different type of crowd.
Well, speaking of, a little more friendly place to play for Penn Staters, Beaver Stadium. We'll ask you a couple kind of quick hit questions here.
Sure.
What do you remember about playing at Beaver Stadium?
There's a couple of things I remember. So, when we scrimmaged at Beaver Stadium, right? So you're a freshman. Yeah, I'd been to a couple of Penn State games. Never been on the field until my freshman year. So you scrimmage in Beaver Stadium. And the thing you remember about Beaver Stadium then is how quiet it is, because, all you hear is Joe Paterno yelling from the 30th row of the stadium at somebody. And, it's like, wow, it's kind of feels like an empty place, and then you come out on game day and it is just such a different atmosphere. And it's incredibly loud. I think people underestimate to a certain extent how loud it is. It's incredibly festive. There's a ton of commotion and things going on, which is only multiplied since I've left. And so what I remember most about Beaver Stadium, and we had a good team my senior year, is that when you're winning a game like we played against West Virginia, beating 51-6, it's a lot of fun to play football at Beaver Stadium. You got a crowd of, we weren't quite as large back then. I guess we had like 95 or 96,000 people. Then everybody's just having a great time. It was a night game. People were fun. The fans were loud, enjoying it. We had a great day on the field. And as you look back as a player, there's just a lot of great memories from that. Like, it was just a lot of fun, and it was exciting. It's the, most popular event in the state of Pennsylvania, right? That's where everybody wants to be. And when you, kind of take home a big win. And West Virginia, then I'm not sure, what they were ranked. I think they were having a decent season in 91, not like an amazing season. But, you beat a big time college team in front of your hometown fans at night. It's just wonderful.
You mentioned Coach Paterno yelling from the 30-yard line during the scrimmages. Is there, this is sort of a tough question. Is there one story about Joe Paterno that you kind of recall the most often, or maybe your favorite Joe Paterno story?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, a favorite one would be tough because there's just so many. But one of the ones that kind of made me laugh, I wasn't present for, so I'll just kind of try to do my best job at telling it. So after I was leaving Wall Street, I was applying to business schools. So one of the business schools I applied to was Harvard Business School, where I actually ended up enrolling. And so I remember calling back to Joe and said, "Hey, could you write me a recommendation?" He's like, "Oh, I'd be honored. Send me what, like, whatever it is, like, I'll do it for you. Just send me the paperwork. I'll get it turned around." And I remember speaking to his assistant, I called her up, like, whatever, like a week before it was due. I said, "Hey, I just want to make sure it went out." She said, "Oh no, he did that. Like, you're all set. Like, that was mailed, like, that was mailed, like, 48 hours after you called 2 weeks ago." I was like, "Great." And anyway, I got accepted at Harvard Business School, and I'm kind of walking around one day and I run into the guy who actually interviewed me for my in-person interview. He's like, "I got to tell you a story." I was like, "Okay, like, well, what's going on?" He said, "So, I got your application. I interviewed you and you talked about your experience at Penn State. And then, whatever. And then all of a sudden, this guy calls my office, right? And he wants to talk to me, right? And I guess Joe had asked me who I interviewed with. I don't really remember all the details here. And, he said, Joe called me on the phone, right? And he's like, I couldn't get him off the phone, right? He wouldn't, like Joe was going to make his case. And I was just like, I put the phone down and I remember, I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, this is like, this is just over the top. And then what had happened was he had dinner with his uncle or cousin or something like that, some family relative, but not immediate family. And he said, I can't believe that this Joe Paterno guy called me on the phone for this kid's, this application. And the person happened to be a huge Penn State fan. He had just read Ken Denlinger's book For the Glory, which was out at that point in time, in which I was one of the more prominent characters, as was Bob Check, by the way, who plays a big role in that book. And he's like, who did you? You go, oh, you have to let him in. You have to let him in. And he says, so then I spend I get harangued by Joe for half an hour. Then I sit down, try to have dinner and vent my frustration with this whole process. And then my cousin sits there and all he'll do is talk about you for an hour. So anyway, that's my kind of favorite Joe Paterno story I wasn't present for. Maybe it helped me get into Harvard Business School. I'm not sure, but it's a good one. I think it also just, though, to kind of sum it up, I think one of the things that people don't really understand about him is how loyal he was. He really stood by his players, and I think that's something in today's world, college sports has changed a lot, but loyalty is a big deal and always was a big deal to him. And it's a big deal to me today. And I think that had a big impact on my life.
Does it still have an impact on your life, Rudy? Because I can see this is meaningful to you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, loyalty is one of those things that, you have to earn it, right? And you have to keep it. But I think one of the things that's really great about it is, you can always count on it. And, when you're loyal to your friends, when you're loyal to your teammates and things like that, that's the bond that really keeps you together. That's what makes you a family. That's what makes you important to each other. And I think that's one of the big lessons I took away from Penn State.
Do you see yourself, as much as you can embodying, that loyalty trait, those character traits as a business owner, as a man, yeah, as a member of the community?
Absolutely. Yeah. I try to be very loyal to our employees. You'd have to talk to them to see if I'm doing a good job or not. But, I try to be very loyal to them. They're people. I think, in today's world, it's a very different world. People don't get a job, show up at 9, leave at 5, and, bring their lunch bucket to work every day. I mean, a lot of people do, don't get me wrong, but they have options on where they want to do it. Right. And the people who are really good, they know where they're going to get treated better. And when I say better, I don't necessarily mean be paid better or this better, or that, you get fancy shoes or a new hat. What I mean is, people who really respect them for who they are, the work that they do, the ideas that they have. And I really try to go out of my way to kind of make Burgeon a place that embodies that, where we value you not just for what you do here, but who you are as a person and what's important to you.
Rudy, following up on that, and we'll end on this question. You talk about loyalty, you talk about everything that Penn State meant to you, still
Sure.
continues to mean to you. If you're talking with, a high school 4-star, 5-star recruit, a student athlete, somebody who's trying to decide, where do I want to spend the next 4 years of my life as a student athlete, as a college student, why would Penn State be a good fit for them? Why would you pitch Penn State to somebody who, like you said, does have options?
Sure. I mean, there's, I don't really know all of the options. It's a very different world than when I played. So I'm going to speak from the experience I had, and hopefully some of this is still relevant today, because, I think these things are important. And one is that, when you make your college choice, right, you are doing more than deciding where you're going to play football. You are trying to find the place that is going to serve as the best foundation for the rest of your life. Right. And athletics is definitely a part of it. Academics is a part of it. Right. Student life is a part of it. Different people are going to have different weighings about what they care about and what they don't. But I think what's really important is that you have to look at a place and say, how is this place going to impact me 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, et cetera. And so as you look around, I think it's really important that you look not only at the athletic facilities and who the head coach is, but like you look at the academic programs of the university. How are they rated? Are they improving? Is there investment there, whether it's in research or teaching? The Alumni Association, what are they like? These are the people you're going to meet, at football watch parties. Like one of my favorite things to do when I lived in Las Vegas was, I'd go to the Penn State football watch party, at some bar in Las Vegas at 9:00 in the morning, and you'd hang out with, 30 other Penn Staters to watch a game. And yes, they did have dollar beers, but I did not drink them. But I think one of the things that, you really want to do is find that and find what's important to you, right? Like as you go through this process, Penn State was the right spot for me. It doesn't mean it's the right spot for my teammate, right? Picking your college and what you're going to do and what you're looking to do in life are very personal decisions. And you really need to look at what's best for you and really spend some time thinking about that. It's not about the biggest stadium. It's not about, what I mean? Those things, nobody cares about that, 20 years later. What's going to create the foundation for the rest of your life? And when I think about Penn State, it has an amazing alumni association. Everybody has heard of the school, so there's a lot of name recognition. There's more CEOs that, are from Penn State than Harvard Business School. Last time I checked in the Wall Street Journal article, or whatever that thing that the Alumni Association sends around, at least once a year. I'm not sure who I count with. Maybe I count both. So maybe I cancel myself out. But I think, those types of things are really important. Where can you grow as a person? That's what it is, and it's not about having college be easy. It's about it having be hard and learning and trying to become a better person. And I think Penn State offers numerous ways to do that. And I would put them up against anybody in that competition. They need to be in your top 5 and you need to do your homework.
Well, Rudy, here on the Football Letter podcast, we want to bring on lettermen who embody the success with honor mantra. Certainly, you're a great example of that. 2-time Penn State grad, business owner. Thank you so much for your time today. We really enjoyed having you on.
John, thank you so much. I really enjoyed my time here. I look forward to seeing the episode and listening to it myself and seeing how I did and, things like that. But really appreciate your time. Appreciate you reaching out to me. And with that, I'll just say I wish to all the, the current members of the Penn State football team, coaches, staff, et cetera. I hope you guys have a great season this year. I'll be watching from up here in the north and hopefully get down to Beaver Stadium for a game or two as well. So good luck, fellas.